It's not anything to be ashamed of to say, well, it kind of looks like that structure's worked quite well for the entire duration of mankind, and so maybe we mess with it at our peril.
You're hearing about family values from the childless and unmarried. Don't follow them.
The women have to stop blaming men for their sense of malaise or misery.
I didn't create you people to kill and torture and rape each other. I created you to be good to each other. I love the God who had a flood.
And we're back to one of the cultural topics of this channel, which this one is the sexual revolution has failed. The main topic here is what does that mean and how do we address it? The sexual revolution has obviously failed because we have all the signs that it is failing. We have single motherhood at an exponential increase. We have abortion on demand, which they want to pass off as a part of the sexual revolution, but the sexual revolution came long before this abortion on demand thing became even popularized. Their main concept with the sexual revolution was the introduction of the condom and female birth control. The idea was that humans, through this new revolution, could engage in sexual activity without the consequences of procreation. Now, I'm very glad that the sexual revolution has failed, just to disclose that at the start. For me, it is not good for humans to segregate mentally and psychologically and emotionally the act of sex from reproduction. Yes, it's good that sex is fun, but that doesn't mean that your entire existence should be devoid of the responsibilities that come with it. And we see this manifested in other ways. You have the chronic fuckboy syndrome, which is not good for humanity, which also obviously promotes the phenomenon of single mothers. It also produces welfare queens. This is another sign that the sexual revolution has indeed failed. Women are having children as a form of getting money from the government. That is not a sign that this program is working. And the main point, my main thrust behind it is how do we address this reality that this agrarian creature that we are, who is accustomed to having the act of sex being naturally accompanied with the paralyzing fear that that act will produce a child that we will be responsible for, is something that we should be in tune with rather than trying to destroy. But that was the very thing that the sexual revolution promised to do. And as we're navigating the waters of how the hell are we going to come to grips with this failure, with this inability for modern technology and development and science to actually accomplish this grand goal of being a sexually revolutionized species, how do we cope with it and what should that look like? And I found an article that will be in the description below that is actually part of the Me Too phenomenon. And it's unintentional that the left would show us the cultural hypocrisy that they have for the sexual revolution, especially when it's in favor of women. In this College Fix article, which, by the way, it's a horrible example of how men should be treated in our legal system. I'm just going to start out with that. This is a horrible example of how men should be treated in the legal system, bar none. What I want to focus, however, is the unintentional lesson that the left is admitting to when one of the victims, the female, claims that she was not culturally respected, even though she's not claiming any rape happened. and she's not really having regret the night before or the night after. Her primary complaint is, in fact, that he did not respect her culture in pursuing her after their encounter. And that's something that I'm really on the fence on. And the reason I'm making this video is because I had an idea about this, and part of me agreed with it. And I need to hash it out, and I know I'm going to come to some conclusions that might be wrong, but just hear me out. Just hear me out, and let me at least get the thought process out in the air. My summation from this is that in a world where the sexual revolution has failed, and we have all these problems stemming from the idea that we can have sex without consequence, despite the fact that there are, in fact, consequences, how do we address these issues that we're having because of those consequences? And what is the natural way for us to address the dynamic of our sex with these consequences? Namely, the fact that the sexual act still creates a child, or at least has the risk of creating a child. Having sex has not been divorced from procreation. That aspect of the sexual revolution has failed. That's the problem. So what we have here is an example of a female really taking umbrage that the male did not not just reciprocate, but did not maintain any accountability to her when there was a mutual event of sexual tension or a sexual activity on some level. And part of me really agrees with that in light of the fact that the sexual revolution has failed. I feel that in a world where we have to acknowledge that this is not working, that maybe it is a good idea, hypothetically, that men be held accountable to women that they have expressed sexual interest in. And the results of that are, well, we call it enforced monogamy, but how do you enforce something where there is no contract, where there's no marriage per se? Well, there's child support. That's if you can prove that the child is yours, or if there is even a child to be, if there's even a child in the mix. But this notion, a man was Me Too'd because a woman expressed discomfort in the fact that he didn't respect her culture and he didn't express interest in her after their encounter. And I'm really just speaking out loud concerning how do we actually address that phenomenon, and is that a legitimate grievance? And I'm aware that there needs to be a grace cushion. There needs to be a nice gray area where the sexes can interact without consequence. That's fine. But the question is, where does that start? And at what point do we say that there is a sense of obligation? That's really what I'm trying to work out here, because the whole marriage dynamic, when we're trying to move on with the sexual revolution, has become very, very muddied and very, very uncertain. So at what point should a man be obligated to be held accountable to a woman when he expresses interest in her? For example, is it okay for a man to simply sleep with a woman and leave her the next morning in a world where she could still be a pregnant woman when he leaves? That is an important question that in a world where the sexual revolution is a lie and there are consequences for that act, that we need to address, because it's not cheap. It's not something that's the whole notion, the whole free love notion is being exposed as a lie. There's an entire subset of emotion that is not simply rooted in pathos. It's rooted in the reality that when this act occurs, that he is putting her at risk of having to care for another life. And that's something that needs to be taken into account at some point. And to be perfectly honest, I know there are some people listening to this who are going to say, well, just abort the kid. That's not really an option anymore either, when you consider the fact that our replacement rate in first world countries where abortion is available, it's not sufficient. We're not replacing our own native populations. We don't have the replacement rate for those who have this culture of trying to being a sexually revolutionized society, which, again, it's a failure. We need to stop acting like this is an actual possibility and really face the music when it comes to that reality, to that fact that we cannot behave sexually without consequence. And I just found this article interesting, not in its direct application, because it's a shit art. It is really a piece of tyranny. But I have to give it a second thought, because in a world where sexual activity does still hold some burden of responsibility, we need to have some understanding or some agreement as to what that responsibility looks like and how it's enforced as a society at large. And so those were my thoughts on it. Have a good one, guys. Stay carnal.
Quick. If you guys like the channel, feel free to please leave a donation so we can keep the channel going. All donations go to support the channel, more equipment, better content. But if you don't want to just leave a donation, feel free to jump by Carnal's Menagerie. We sell basically t-shirts. If you have any kind of carnalism that you want to see on a t-shirt, please go ahead and leave it in the comments and I will get that uploaded for you. But guys, this is how you support the channel. Anyways, thank you guys as always, and just remember, stay carnal. Bye guys.